I've been prompted to make this video on the back of a comments section discussion with a very bright user who clearly wants to think about economics and economic issues, but with whom I have what effectively amounts to a language barrier. He doesn't speak economics. One of the fundamental mistakes he and most people make about economics has to do with the nature, function, origin, and significance of money, so that is what this video will address. The best story I can tell to illustrate the origin, function, and nature of modern paper money is not that of the gold, then paper-based currencies of Europe and the US, but that of the Yap Islands, a small territory in Micronesia in the Pacific Oceans. The Yapese trade using stone discs of varying sizes, including some up to 4 meters in diameter. However, when goods change hands, it's far more convenient to simply hand over a piece of paper that allows the owner to claim a disc than to actually move the disc itself. The paper has the exact same value the stone did in the first place. Now, why did the stone have value? Because the Yapese had all agreed that stones would always be accepted in transactions. This is arguably the most important function of money. It is a method for transacting. The piece of paper fulfills exactly the same function. Money is argued to have other functions, but they all stem from this first. It is a store of value. You can use it to produce now and consume later. It's a measure of value. It enables us to make statements like, that haircut is worth 20 bunches of bananas. This is what money is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's simply a commodity, any commodity, that everyone agrees will be universally acceptable as a transactive method. Whether it's gold, bits of paper, cigarettes in POW camps, trading cards in school playgrounds, it really doesn't matter a great deal. Now, an argument I hear a great deal as to why it does matter is that if the money is gold, it has a fixed supply, whereas the Fed can just increase the supply of paper money whenever it feels like it. Regardless of the fact that this is at best a half-truth, why should it matter? Let's say the Fed said tomorrow every $10 bill will be worth $20 and every 20 worth 40, etc. What effect would this have? Sweet fuck all. Everybody would just double their prices. So what's the difference between this and the Fed printing a whole bunch of notes? That depends. If markets are perfectly competitive and instantaneously clearing, and we'll discuss those two terms in a later video, they will make an instantaneous adjustment to prices. The real level of output will not increase or decreases, but prices will rise. The whole issue becomes a great deal more complicated, however, when we start talking about time. Time is the reason we need interest rates. Interest rates are effectively the price of having your money now as opposed to later. If you've got $10 of cash in your wallet right now, you're losing out on the interest you could have got if you'd put it in a bank. That's the price you pay for having the cash. If you want to get a loan, you'll pay interest on the money you borrow. Again, it's the price for having the money now as opposed to later. Because money is a commodity, there is a market for it, and the interest rate is the price in that market. People demand less money when the interest rate is higher. They're happier not borrowing it, or just leaving it in the bank to accrue interest. As you should know, the US Federal Reserve manages the interest rate in the US. It does so by the following mechanism. If it wants to raise the interest rate, it makes money scarcer by selling government bonds. People pay cash for the bonds, which the central bank keeps and effectively sits on. The money is retired from the system. As money is now scarcer but demand for it hasn't changed, the price of money must rise. Thus the interest rate increases. Because the money markets move so much faster than commodity prices, however, the interest rate going up doesn't mean that other prices change to compensate overnight. It changes the level of output in the economy. Firms who would previously have borrowed money to invest see the new higher interest rate and decide that the new factory they would have built is no longer worth it. The loan would be too expensive. Consumers who would have taken out a loan to buy a car can no longer afford to pay it back, so they stop spending too. GDP growth slows, output declines. Eventually, however, the market catches up with itself. Firms see less demand for their goods and so lower their prices, which draws consumers back in. This was probably the central bank's objective in the first place. Central banks the world over have a commitment to keep inflation low and stable. So why do they do this? Why are prices so important and such a target of government policy worldwide? Well, it comes back to what money is supposed to do. I mentioned earlier that it was a method for carrying out transactions. It has to be acceptable everywhere, but it does have other important roles. It's a measure of value and a store of wealth. These properties are disrupted by unstable prices. If prices are moving around wildly, it's impossible to tell what things are worth. Firms don't know how much money they'll stand to make if they expand production, so they play on the safe side. Consumers see prices rising fast, but have to wait a whole year to get a rise in their salary, so they defer spending. Savers and those on fixed incomes lose out because the £1,000 they had last year can only buy £500 worth of goods this year if prices have doubled. Inflation arbitrarily punishes some people and makes it harder to do business. But deflation, when prices are falling, is even worse. If a sofa costs £500 but you know it'll cost £400 in a month's time, why buy now? The trouble is, all a firm sees by your not buying the sofa is a fall in demand, so they drop their prices further, which leads to more consumers to deferring spending, which leads to a greater reduction in demand, etc. Falling prices causes a spiral of wages, prices, and output, which leads to unemployment and recession. Now, I'm going to save a discussion of monetarism proper for another video, but to summarize, monetarists believe that money supply alone is responsible for movements in prices, and that output never deviates from full capacity for long unless there are structural problems in labor or product markets. We'll discuss what all that means, as I say, in a later video, but the practical upshot of this is that monetarists don't believe in fiscal policy, using government spending to influence the economy, but are big fans of monetary policy. But this is already too long a video, and I'm sorry to take up so much of your time on a terribly uninteresting topic, but here's the thing. I find this stuff fascinating. I've made a career out of teaching and researching it, and I hope that a few of you have found something of interest in this mini lecture. Next time we'll talk about GDP, or national income, and that should be shorter, snappier, and a tad more controversial.